This episode is sponsored by Patio Well. Use coupon code MC16 at patiowell.com to save 16% off all products. Welcome back to our home renovation remodel thingamabobber, whatever we're calling it. I was going to get started on the island today, but there has been a last minute change in materials requested. Literally the day I was about to start cutting stuff up to make that. So I need to regroup on that. So in the meantime, as I'm looking around what else I can do, we got this wall here that we can deal with. It needs some stuff. And there is that same wall in the elevation. We haven't looked at the model in a while. So that's kind of where we're at as far as the walls go. This is the hutch cabinet we made a few episodes ago. There's that front wall with the windows and the fridge. And then this is that first row of lowers with the tall cabinet next to it. So now we're working on this upper section here. Upper hood vent thing, upper. So I'm going to tackle these uppers first and get them built up because it'll be maybe a little bit easier. A couple of interesting details here. So we have the lower rail of the uppers actually laid on its side to create a ledge. And then we also have these decorative corbels, which we'll make in the future. This little ledge here also is up here on the hood. And then, of course, back here on the other side. So looking in cross section, there's that lower rail sitting on its edge. And you can also see we have under cabinet lighting and a plug mold and an electrical chase built in with this nice filler to make it look nice and clean and complete on the underside. So there's a few things going on. The bottom of the actual cabinet, the plywood, is actually inside of the rail. So this will be kind of an interesting detail. So this will be a little bit different than, I guess, normal standard uppers, and it'll be a little bit different than the lowers, which are already built. But we have some of the same details. The stiles are still a 2-inch show, and then the mid stiles and moles are an inch show. So we'll end up making these boxes, these 2 boxes here first, and then we'll deal with this hood. And I also already went through and milled up my stock for this. So these are all the 2-inch stiles. All the face frame stock is an inch thick, except for that lower rail on its side. This is inch thick. And then we have our 1-inch intermediate things, and these are the top rails. The crown molding will come down and sit right about here, leaving a 1-inch show on this piece so it matches the width of these. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and start joining together a face frame for, I think we'll do the first one first, the narrow one first, just to see how that goes. So there is this face frame. I think this makes a lot more sense to me, at least now that I've seen it built. We got this little return piece on here that'll cap the side. So as I'm thinking about what I want to do next, or at least kind of thoughts going forward, on the other cabinets I've done with end panels, I've always built the face frames, built the box, then attached the end panel, and then touch up the paint on the side. But since this is just one end panel, and I don't know, I think it would be easier this time, I want to build out this side of the cabinet with the end panel installed, and then I can spray this whole unit before attaching all the plywood to the boxes. But in order to do that, I would need to make and attach the plywood side for this side, and I would just mask off this one piece of plywood. So in order to do that, I need to at least cut the shelf pins into this, because that'll make it a lot easier than trying to cut shelf pins into a fully assembled thing after the fact. And then before I glue up this face frame, I think it also makes sense to mortise for all the hinges. That way I can do that with the individual styles instead of trying to do this to a fully assembled case. So I'll have my butt hinges to mortise into those two styles as well, as sort of a thing in the back of my mind of things that have to happen before it actually gets glued together. But I just took this upstairs, and this is the right size, the right height and everything. So I backsplash ends, and then my crown molding covers right at the right point. So this is the exact right height, which is a nice sanity check because it did make a story stick for this. So it does have all the dimensions on there. But even with this, I still, I don't know, I still don't trust it. So that's good to go. I'm happy with the height. So I'm going to go ahead and just knock out the other face frame to this same point, and then I can work on, I'll probably work on the shelf pins for this piece of plywood first on both of them, and then the end panels, maybe. So here is the face frame for the second cabinet, and I went ahead and I cut all of the hinge mortises already on this one. So I think that's what I'll do here as well. We'll go through and I'll cut these hinge mortises, and then we can figure out what we're going to do next after that. So I've copied the layout from the other one onto here. The hinges are not symmetrical top to bottom, because I want the hinges to line up with the top of the rail on the door, and these doors will make the bottom rail is actually taller than the top one, so they're a ½ inch difference in placement from the bottom to the top to make up for that. So I'm going to go through some layout, get this all laid out on here. What am I doing? This. Line. And since these are going to be painted, I have the router set a bit deeper than the thickness of a leaf. That way when there's some paint down in there, these will end up flush. There's probably a good chance I'll have to do some cleanup work, especially around the edges, to get some paint out of there after these come back from paint. But I figure it'll still be easier to cut these now than later on. So I'm going to route away as much of this waste as possible, and then just chop back to the lines, and that's some hinges. Just a little low, just a tiny bit. So at least in theory, when there's a layer of paint in there, it'll come up with flush. Ah! One more hinge done. While I sit here and cut the rest of these hinge mortises, let me tell you about Patio Well. Their metal sheds are available in several sizes up to their new 10 by 12, and they just launched their new line of plastic sheds. Since I just built a barn, I'm all set on outbuildings for now, so they sent me out one of their deck boxes to check out. These are also available in a range of different sizes. This one is 230 gallons. It was very easy to assemble. The lid opens and closes smoothly, and it's robust and durable. The deck box is waterproof, so it could be used outside, but it could also be used inside for additional storage and organization. I know our kids could fill this thing up with all their toys and stuff in no time at all. This box is going to go out onto the back deck, and it's going to give me a great place to store all the extra stuff for the renovation, and this will greatly declutter my workspace while keeping the items that I need close by. Visit patiowell.com and use coupon code MC16 to save 16% off all the products, including the 10 by 16 metal shed and the new line of plastic sheds, as well as the deck boxes. So thank you, Patio Well, for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to the shop. Okay, I had a little bit of a suspicion here with things, so I'm going to derail this video for at least the next few minutes. Can you see the error? The error is that all 5 of these doors are supposed to be the same width. And this is a mistake that I made almost 2 years ago that has finally surfaced. Almost 2 years ago, we were still framing. We had Mike here, and he asked me where this is supposed to go, the pot filler. The pot filler is supposed to be centered on the range, so I looked at the plans, the scale drawings, and I looked at it, I measured it, and I said, okay, that looks like it's 6 feet off the wall. And that's where we placed this. That's where it stayed. That's where the sheetrock covered all the plumbing behind here. That's where I laid out these lower cabinets from, that center line, and that's where I laid out these uppers from, that center line. And that center line should have been more over here. And this one's it's a little annoying and a little frustrating because this is all my fault, and I had the opportunity to find this a long time ago. So the first part of the error, I already know kind of what happened to get that wrong dimension for Mike. I went to this floor plan, and this is when we were framing, and I probably had a big, giant, chunky tape measure like this with a big old hook on the end, and I did one of these things where I just kind of laid it on there with the hook, and I noticed, oh, okay, that's 1.5 inches, and the scale on this is a half, what is it? And the scale on this is 1/4 inch to the foot. Now, had I had one of these or one of these with me that day, this wouldn't have been a problem. I would have laid this thing on here, centered it on the range, and saw that it was actually 1 inch and 9/16, not 1.5 inches. There we go, all fixed. 5 even width doors all the way across, as it's supposed to be. I feel pretty good about that, getting that behind me. So that little detour is over, so now I gotta get back into what I was doing here. I'm gonna go ahead and make the plywood sides now. I'm gonna make both sides so I have them, because they're gonna be identical mirror images. So 4 sides with shelf pin holes and light bar bus grooves in them. Okay, so that takes care of the case sides. So when there is a panel on the outside, the case will come into the style somewhere in this range. So there's a little bit of a step here between the case side and this bottom rail, which is going to catch the bottom of the cabinet. But that also means that when I install my bus bar, I want to be able to put my power thing for the bus bar down in the electrical chase in this little like hollow area here. So not too big of a deal. When the bus bar goes into here, I just have to install it so it extends past the bottom of the plywood there. And then I'll just have to make a little notch in the rail here to receive the power thingamabobber. So it's just like kind of mortised in here a little bit. So that's kind of where that's at. All this down here is my chase. So I have the under cabinet light bar, which will be right here. There's a little filler. This whole area is a void, so it's all electrical chase from like here to here to here. And then I have the plug mold in the back, and then another filler against the wall. But that's for later. Details for later. So here's where I think things are at now. We're going to do some glue ups, I think. So the face frames, once I notch for that, whatever you want to call that, power giver connector, the spring-loaded connector thing, once I notch for those in the returns, the face frames can be glued up and they should be pretty much good where they're at. On the other side of the face frame, there'll be a return piece that I'll apply later. That'll get notched as well to receive that connector and the bus bar and everything. But I'm going to leave that off as a separate piece so I can install it in place later on. So I'll get those glued up, and then I'm going to glue up the stock for the side panels. So this is some of the extra pieces of the V-groove paneling I made for the sunroom. I'm going to just make a spline and put 2 of them together, and that'll be my panel stock for the sides, which we can install once everything is glued up. So that's what I'm going to do next. Now this is too big. Oh, no, it isn't. Oh, oh God, that's really off. Okay, while I'm working through the glue ups, I'm going to get started on the hood surround. So this is the hood unit itself. So we need to make like a enclosure box that this thing goes up into, and it lives inside. So I did a little bit of modeling here, and I have a piece of plywood, and we're going to make this weird shape into a reality. So laying this thing out as far as the overall like depth and width of the whole unit is pretty easy, because it's just going to be the enclosure plus the thickness of the material you're using, and that gives you your final dimension. In our case here, where this is meant to go into like a finished sides of 42 inches, So that's kind of the finished width. And then the depth you can kind of vary wherever you want. But I have a little filler in the back, and then I have the thickness of the front surround. So the depth of the unit is just the thickness of these two front pieces plus the depth of the hood insert. So those are the easy dimensions. The more interesting dimension is going to be the overall height, because I have measured this out or laid it out so that when I come and do my backsplash tiles, they come up and then this thing should land perfectly on a course for the tiles, so I don't have like a thin tile on top or having to deal with the error of that. So this should land perfectly on the course of the tile. So just like the upper cabinets, I don't need it to go all the way up to the ceiling. I just need enough to mount my crown to so it's supported. So I made the top here 2.5, which will be the same height as the top rail on the other uppers. But for visualizing, at least at this point, this panel is the overall size of the largest dimension. And I'm going to make that first so I have something to kind of look at and play with and take upstairs and make sure it actually is the right size before I start actually making all of the parts that go along the front. Eventually, this piece of plywood will be duplicated to another piece, so I have two of the same. Those will be the side panels, and then all of the stuff on the front will just get stuck on to the piece of plywood. So that confirmed quite a bit. So when I shoved this thing all up to the ceiling, I had about 1/8 of an inch above my line of where my tile should be, which is going to work out fine because my ceiling does that. So when this thing is in their level, it'll probably be right there perfectly, or it might have a little bit of extra space that we can fudge up or down in the grout line. So that takes care of the height, and I just want to make sure it actually fits in the dimensions and that my enclosure ends up the right size for the run. It should end up at 42 wide. So if we take this thing over here, if I take a piece of 3/4, I flush it up here on the back with the hood and everything, which this thing's got a bulge in it. That's not helpful. Right around there. Then I should have enough room for pieces 7/8 up here, and a little bit. And maybe it might be a little too snug. Let's see how it goes in the other way. Perfect. Actually, this is a 1/16 under. So then when I actually build my thing to 42, I'll have a little bit of clearance in here. I don't want it to be like a super snug fit because it's not going to be fun to get this insert up in there. So you want to have it a little bit loose. So if you haven't seen one of these before, like I hadn't, basically how this works is you just put this thing up into the hole and you screw through the liner into the surround. And then on the inside of this, there's these little cap pieces that'll cover up the screws. So if there is a little bit of deviation in the inside there, this kind of covers it up. So this thing is undersized, intentionally undersized by the manufacturer. So you have a little bit of clearance as it goes up into that perfect size. So this one is supposed to go into a full 42-inch surround. It's about 1/8 of an inch undersized to go into a 42-inch surround when you have 3/4 inch sides, so they give you a little bit of built-in wiggle room. So I think we're good. So now that I'm happy with the overall outside dimensions of this thing, this piece of plywood should be modified to be the actual side of the unit. So I'm going to take off part of the top, so it's the same 2.5-inch top rail as the upper cabinets. I don't need it to touch the ceiling. I got to take 7/8 of an inch out of the width because I want to apply all of my facing stuff like this, not like that. So I'll pull that width out of there. Then I got to pull 1 inch off the bottom. My bottom trim piece is going to extend past it and give me a little lip on there. And I want this to also edge band this area back here. So when you're like looking up in there, it's edge band with this. So I'm basically replacing the plywood with this. So if you custom modify this, and then I guess I can make another one for the other side. And I can actually start getting into making all of the the panel stuff that goes in the front. So one of the things I was worried about is these blocks wouldn't be far enough apart. And that's exactly what happened. Because the idea with them is that they apply clamping pressure across the middle of the joint, and their angle is so subtle that to actually do that, they'd have to be like back in here somewhere. But fortunately, what I didn't think of is that I can go directly from the block on the panel to the edge of the board. Not with this clamp, apparently. I can go here, like this. And that puts me across the actual seam. There we go. It's tight on both sides. Ooh. Okay, while that's sitting, let's go clone the side. There's like a quick little dry assembly to get a feel for if this is going to work. I think it's going to work. Again, crown molding will be coming in around this line here. So that's kind of the finished look with that all white. And if I take this out of here, the actual hood does fit inside, and I got a little bit of room to spare in all dimensions. So I think this is going to work out pretty nicely. So next, I think I will permanently attach the sides, get those attached. I'll probably cut maybe some stretchers to go inside, just to kind of help stabilize it a little bit. And then we have the little lip detail thing to add to the underside. So now for these return pieces, they need to be notched around where the uppers will come into. So this line here represents the front face or the front edge of the uppers where they'll come in. So I need this lip to only go to here and then get cut off and just be flush, so that the bottom is still here is like edge banding for the plywood, but there's this notch here where the upper nests into it. And one other little thing I did is that my depth from here to here is a little bit less than the actual final depth of the upper, so that when I slide this thing up onto the wall between the uppers, it should bottom out here before it bottoms out on the wall back here. And that'll make sure that this is nice and tight, and I can shim a little bit in the back before I put my screws in to make up that difference. But that was at least me trying to think ahead. We'll see how that actually goes though. So this line needs to go here. So that is where this guy needs to get notched to, just like this. All of that needs to be removed. And then I need a finished length on this. And then that guy can go on there. So I gotta make this big old long rip notch thing here. Okay, while that lip thing is drying, I'm gonna hop back to our uppers and start getting these side panels in here. To connect these uppers to the hood, because there's no real good way to like clamp or screw these together up in here, I'm going to use the Festool connectors again, and I'll have my access hole on the face frame, and that hole will get covered by the crown molding when it goes on. But that'll give me a good way to actually suck these together in place where I can't really get any fasteners at all. Okay, I got ahead of myself. I was supposed to reference off the face onto the bottom of the machine, because here I can't put my fence on here because this gets in the way. And of course, I normally don't really bother centering the domino because in the thickness, because it doesn't matter normally. This time it would have made it a little bit easier. So I'm plunging like this, but if I do that, I'll be offset. So I got this 32nd of an inch shim, which puts it back into the right position. And now I can actually cut the dominoes into this thing, the hood surround thingamajiggy. We'll put these together and we'll see how they line up. They should be pretty close, and I can flush them up now so that when I do the assembly and I attach these together, this will end nice and flush. That's the idea here, at least. That's what I'm trying to work towards. These things ending up flush. This is amazing. Super duper amazing. So the roll on this, I'll be able to actually screw up and through here. And it looks like if I put this all the way down, that lines up where it's supposed to line up. If I shove this one all the way back, that one lines up where it's supposed to line up. So that should make the process of installing quite a bit easier. I have just a little bit of discrepancy here, but I will sand this all nice and flush now. Again, I'm only going to see an inch of this, just this little bit right down here, so I'll make sure it lines up nice and perfect so that when I put these together, I don't have too big of a line right there where I have a paint seam. They're not too bad, but gonna need a little bit of tweaking. This is nice and tight. I was kind of worried about this, but this line right through here is nice and tight where the face frame comes into the surround, so that's gonna look nice. So I have a few little paint prep things to do, and then we're gonna I'll wrap this video up by showing a little bit of the paint. People like to see that, the first coat going on, covering up the wood a little bit, and that'll be it for this episode. yeah, those are all built and painted and ready to go for making it into a box phase and then install after that. So I'm glad we had this little detour, got these kind of knocked out. This was really one of probably the last thing in my mind where I was getting into it, being like, I don't know at all what it is that I'm doing here. So another mental hurdle, so to speak, off the list of me trying to figure out how this is all supposed to go together, having never done this before. So the other one's hiding. I don't feel like moving it. But these turned out really nice. The finish looks good, and I think just having these up there on that wall is going to really transform the space even more. So I'm looking forward to getting this in, as well as getting into the island, which we'll start on next time. This will be kind of out here for a bit while I work through building out some of that thing, now that I have all my materials figured out and lined up for that. So that's going to do it for this one. Thank you as always for watching. I greatly appreciate if you have any questions or comments on building a hood surround thing or a weird upper cabinet thing with another one over there. Please feel free to leave me a comment. As always, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And until next time, happy woodworking. Paint your wood.